Hey everybody, welcome to today's panel, The State of Residential Solar, How Solar Businesses Survive 2024 and Are Planning for an Upcoming Market Rebound. We're going to give people a couple more minutes to trickle in before we begin, but in the meantime, we've got a joke for you on the screen. So we'll just give folks a few minutes to get into the meeting. Again, to folks trickling in, welcome to the webinar, The State of Residential Solar. We're going to give people another minute to join the webinar before we begin. Welcome, folks. We've got a joke for you on the screen if you're just getting in, and we're going to get started in just a moment. All right, one more minute and we'll jump into things. And as a reminder, folks, if you do want to send anything in the chat, be sure to change your chat to settings from hosts and panelists to everybody, so that everybody in the webinar here can see what you have to say. Unless you want to send us a private message for some reason. All right, so let's get going. So before we get into it, here's the answer to the joke. What did the wind turbines say to the solar panel? I'm a big fan. All right. Sadly, I can't hear you all laughing and applauding. All right, so thank you everyone for coming to today's event. I'm MJ Gilliland from Bodhi. We're a software platform that helps solar companies to protect and grow their business with happy customers through the power of automation and AI. Just go to our new website, bodhi.solar, to learn more. Now, ahead of the webinar, audience members did have a chance to submit questions. So I thought this one from Vincent Battaglia was perfect to kick us off. If the solar plus industry were to be represented by an emoji, what would that emoji be right now? So to warm up the chat, go ahead and drop your own response into the chat, and be sure that your chat settings, again, are toggled to everyone, not just to the webinar hosts. So I'll give y'all a minute. All right. So now I want to introduce the panelists who will answer that question from their own point of view, but probably with a little more nuance than an emoji. So we've got three heavyweights from the industry here today to answer this question and give us tips that we can use in our solar businesses. So first we have Chris Collins, CEO of Ohm Analytics, a data platform that covers the distributed energy transition with a heavy focus on solar and storage. Welcome, Chris. Next, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna give my emoji. I don't know if we're doing that,
Oh, please verbalize. What was your
I
emoji?
was gonna do the like a flexing bicep. I think that's a good, like good feeling we have to have as an industry.
I love it. Yes, yes, that's what we need. Awesome. Next, we have Sean Sullivan, the managing director at Empower Solar. They are a growing EPC based out of South Carolina, currently operating in 15 states with plans for further expansion. Sean, what would your emoji response to the question be?
Um, I like the muscle. I might maybe I'd do it in a robot arm though, with with some metal on it.
Oh, nice. Is that a hint at further comments about automation, perhaps?
Potentially, yeah.
Okay, great. And then finally, we have Colin Walsh from Sunergy Solar Distribution. They're a rapidly expanding national solar equipment distributor who recently partnered with Amara and Zero to expand upon their mission of providing installers an exceptional experience. Colin, what would your input be to the emoji question?
Oh, I would say we're probably still really optimistic with the sunshine.
Love it.
A happy
Beautiful.
sunshine, no
Great. That's what
matter
we
what
need.
happens.
It will always still be shiny, no matter what. Um, So for those of you in the audience, if you'd like to get in touch with the panelists or with myself, we're posting everybody's LinkedIn accounts into the chat box. And it looks like, okay, yes, we have the chat going now. Perfect. Um, great. So to start things off, we want to ask the audience a poll question. What is your general outlook for the residential solar industry in 2025? The answers are A, things will get worse before they get better. B, things will stay about the same. C, things will improve. Or D, you have no idea, that's why you're here. So we'll give y'all a moment to select your answers. So Sean, what do you think about this question and why?
I think things will definitely improve from conversations that we're having with our finance partners, and their desire to lower rates, lower dealer fees to try to stimulate more lending. I think that in and of itself is going to be a driving force. I think that we're going to see some relief as it relates to finance over the course of this year for sure.
Excellent. Yeah. Chris, Colin, do you guys agree?
Yeah, I think I mean we actually put numbers to this. So we have a forecast which is kind of for 4%, but may go down to flattish or slightly down. So I would put that in the stay about the same. And there's yeah, definitely some positives like Sean mentioned of more financing providers coming to the market. And kind of the stronger installers remaining after this tough period. But at the same time, there's some things weighing in the market, like interest rates and potential policy changes. So I'd say about the same.
All
Yeah,
right.
I would second or third that. It feels like it's very financing driven, and a lot of installers are experimenting with TPO products, and financiers drive a lot of things in the market, including
Yeah.
manufacturing strategies. So we'll probably see some follow-on effects from financing adoption and how that trends in each state, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you all for your input. So we're going to be organizing this conversation into three parts today. First, how is the market different today than it was just a year ago? Second, what to expect for 2025. And then third, how installers can adapt and actually respond to these changes that we expect in the market, followed by time left over for Q&A. So looking at our poll results, it looks like the winner from the audience was things will improve soon. That was 31% of people. Some do think things will get worse before they get better. A little bit fewer think things will stay about the same. So I think that kind of echoes what we heard from our panelists. Great. So jumping into a quick review of what happened over the past year. We'll start off with a perhaps not so fun fact. So reminiscing about the good old days of 2022, the boom times, it turns out the top 10 installers by volume from 2022 are all now out of business. So with that, I turn to you, Chris. Chris, Ohm Analytics is reporting about a 32% contraction in the resi solar this year compared to last. So while those numbers, they really stink to see, many solar providers are making it work. Can you break apart that data a little bit and, maybe comment on a couple of markets that are severely down and which ones might be brighter spots?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was also just thinking about your question of what's changed in the last what's different. But yeah, on that question, I think so 2024 is actually down 25%. I think is the final numbers. The number you quoted might be Q4, so it got a little bit worse as we go throughout the year. But yeah, there's a lot of variances across states. Like in 2024, yeah, there were some good markets like Illinois. Illinois had their kind of NEM 3.0 or NEM change mini version of California. So that was a very positive market. I think California started to stabilize a bit, and we're seeing that in the data and some green shoots there. So that was a positive towards the end of this year, towards the end of 2024. I think the markets that got hit the most were the markets that did the best in the boom times. And so the Florida and Texas would be in that bucket. They saw 30% growth in 2021 and just did really well, and they've come down a lot, and they're still kind of feeling the pain. And I think the Northeast continues to do better. I was just looking at the January data, and they're kind of single digits down or up, so doing a lot better than Florida and Texas.
Yeah. And I know electricity rates still have quite a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
Colin, you originated in the Texas market, but you're working all across the US now. Which markets have surprised you the most from your point of view?
I mean, the market drop in Florida and in Texas somewhat was pretty unexpected. We were really bullish on that market based on the data, using Ohm to guide decision making, and I think a lot of us, forecasted that it would be a brighter year in those markets, but also because of the curve, like Chris said, those were markets also where there was really rapid growth. So I don't think it's that dismal looking at a drop coming off a really high year. Like we might be in a period where we'll be able to climb back up and see really nice numbers. So New Jersey shifting really aggressively to TPO, and some of the financing shifts were a little bit surprising, and that obviously drives a lot of market dynamics. And
Yeah.
that was what's surprising in terms of how high the adoption of TPO products has trended as people shifted from loan to TPO in certain markets, like Jersey in particular, followed by Florida. So.
Yeah. And I know we'll get into this in a moment. Do you feel like that shift to TPO products has exposed the market to a certain amount of risk?
In a way, because a TPO product requires more diligence when the install is completed to get paid because they're owning the project. So more photos, usually longer approval times, and that slows down payments, which changes cash flow dynamics with installers. So definitely have seen that with installers that have shifted from primarily selling loans to TPO. And I think also it changes the AVL quite a bit and puts more emphasis on domestic content. So it has a lot of downstream effects in terms of supply, how much that supply costs, and it can affect a lot of things in the supply chain.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so moving forward to what I think everybody really wants to talk about here is moving forward, what to expect right now. It's changing day by day, but we are going to do our best to share what we know about it. So I want to start off with a quick rapid fire fill in the blank question to get us warmed up, or maybe it's a yes or no question. The first one, super easy. Will the IRA get rescinded? What do you think? I'll start with you, Colin.
So we get good info on this, and there are rumors that as of this week, like, two state senators wouldn't confirm or deny, but said that modifications to the IRA and ITC would be domestic content friendly. So what does that mean? It's a moving target, obviously, but this and other rumors kind of suggest that domestic content could become mandatory for tax credits in the future. And if enforced, this would mean that projects without domestic content would not receive a tax credit. Of course, like, rapidly moving target and rumor, but we're listening really closely to that.
Yeah. Sean, how would you comment on that?
I think that what Colin said is absolutely true. You know, we're very heavily leveraged with TPO products right now. What he said earlier about, you know, the pain points with the transition from traditional finance to TPO, that could not be said in a better way. It's kind of a baptism by fire. It is much more difficult. You have to be much more prepared and really stay on top of your business, because those cash flow effects do ripple downstream. I personally, and again, this is just what I feel. I feel like the tax credits are probably going to be safe. I think that, you know, domestic content is going to be a big thing. We've already been given, you know, 4 different notices from our finance partners regarding domestic content. So I think it's definitely a moving target as it relates to what each component is going to make up in terms of the domestic content. But I think that's going to be a big part of solar this year for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, any input on that?
No, I think I agree with Colin. Be some changes, mainly to the adders, like the low income adder and domestic content adder, and the energy community adder. I think those are probably more under pressure than the ITC.
All right, awesome. So a big topic of conversation, this was brought up many times in the questions that were pre-submitted, has to do with tariffs. So we are keeping an eye on impending tariffs from the White House. Colin, how do you recommend installers best navigate this situation with their suppliers to protect their businesses?
Good question. We get really good intel on this and are monitoring it super closely. The bottom line is that tariffs are going to drive up the prices are going to go up across the supply chain, like both finished products and raw material. Even for manufacturers that are building in the US, their raw material costs are going up. And we're hearing directly from panel manufacturers that subcomponents are already increasing pricing on aluminum frames, back sheets. We have the steel and aluminum tariffs on March 12th. So that'll affect like module frames, inverters, 25%. So at the end of the day, that's going to result in some sort of a module price increase. Estimates we're hearing are 10 to 20% over the course of the year. And then domestic SKUs on inverters, racking, we're seeing in the 5 to 20% range. Tariffs are to drive people to the negotiating table, but it's also to try to drive domestic manufacturing. The challenge that the space faces now is domestic supply hasn't scaled quite fast enough to meet demand, especially for resi TPO products. Like, some of the biggest US module manufacturers are ramping up manufacturing, but most of their supply is going towards C&I utility projects for most of 2025, not available for resi TPO projects. So there are some bright spots. There's like a manufacturer in Texas that we work with really closely called Sirius PV. Like, they're able to produce domestic backsheets, and we have them now. It's going pretty fast, and they can combine with like Unirac and the Enphase or SolarEdge SKUs to get over the 40%. But there's definitely going to be challenges because there's still some components in panel manufacturing that you can't acquire domestically, like bypass diodes. I know you can't get domestically now. You can get domestic cells, but the price point doesn't make sense for most TPO products on resi. So, you know, the financing drives a lot of this, and manufacturing decisioning is either driven towards domestic through them requiring it through the financing products, or the financing product saying you'll get a better rate if you choose domestic. So like, the recommendations, I think, are you have to prepare for a world where domestic is going to become become more a part of your strategy. Like we're recommending that installers prepare for assuming that we're in like a 40% based on the safe harbor tables world, and
Yeah.
getting in really close contact with your preferred manufacturers, your distribution partners to ensure you have up-to-date info, making sure you're forecasting with them so they have supply that matches the financing AVLs that you're going to put out into market, because we're going to definitely see different supply demand dynamics than we saw last year. And if you don't forecast, like they might not have the product that you need for your financing AVL. So just staying really close partnership with manufacturers and distribution partners.
Yeah, I know for sure from my own background in distribution that the earlier you can forecast anything at all to your points of contact there, the better that they can, send that information up the chain to make sure they're able to provide for you and provide what you actually need. So that's great. Thanks so much. Chris, I want to send it over to you. So as we've already touched on, there's been a rise of TPOs since interest rates went up, but now there are rumblings of issues at Sunnova specifically and some fears about the future. So how can residential installers best protect themselves from potential risks that we're seeing in this market?
Yeah, I was also just thinking about another angle of the question you asked Colin too about the tariffs.
Sure.
That's good way to kind of prepare for the supply chain. Another thing that I hear from installers is like how to benefit from a marketing standpoint from those. So
Yeah.
I hear a lot of installers that are using it to drive urgency with messaging to consumers. Hey, tariffs are coming. There might be changes now. The time to go solar. So I think there's a way to take advantage of that too in a tough market.
For sure.
And I sign up for all these things, and I see that in the messaging already to consumers from some of these companies. On the TPO side, yeah, there's there are some, obviously Sunnova's public, so there's a lot out there on Sunnova. I think the obvious thing is to diversify your partners. But even with that, I was thinking about that. It's kind of a double-edged sword of diversification because from what I've heard is that you have a financing company can prioritize if you're diversified, a financing company kind of prioritize who gets payments, and if you want to cut that financing company off, they're not going to prioritize you as well. So it can be a little bit difficult, even if you have like a small portion of your jobs with one of these companies. That can have a real impact. So I think obviously diversification, but is the first thing. But that's not a silver bullet.
Great. And Sean, how is Empower responding to these rapid developments? Like day by day, what kinds of actions are you guys taking to be braced for some of these ups and downs in the market?
I mean, I think the biggest thing that we've learned over the past 2 years is, the need to be agile, the need to be able to pivot. When we first started, we started as a vertical company and, grew organically over a 5-state footprint. And, as we grew, our goal was to keep everything internal, which means, all of our plans, all of our engineering, all of our process, project management, all of our installers, everything was internal. And the thing is when you get really heavily weighted down like that, it's very difficult to pivot. And we learned some valuable lessons with that. So I think staying as agile as possible, not weighting yourself down with fixed cost. And getting involved, having we have a compliance team that, is always looking into changes in utility policy and, AHJs, electrical codes, all those kinds of things that, can make an impact on the business. Partnerships and advocacy groups that we, are part of, relationships with our distributors, finance partners, try to get, as much information as we can. And, again, just being able to pivot and being agile to be able to change as the market changes.
Awesome. And so I want to move on to a couple of questions we've been getting from the audience. I'm getting one question here. What time frame are we thinking for adjustments to the ITC for domestic content? Are we thinking this will be phased into the current 30% rate? Colin, do you want to give a response on that one?
I mean, the people that we're talking to say it's a rapidly moving target. And again, these are like conversations that are happening. I'm sure that there are some people in the administration that are one way, some that are the other, and who knows how it'll work out. But I think it's like safe to be prepared for a world where domestic content needs to become part of your mix. And I mean, there are really clear guidelines that are set, like like the domestic content adder is like 40% on the safe harbor table. So it's really clear what the baseline will likely be, and it's unlikely it's going to become like 30%. And then on production tax credit, like it jumped up to, I think it's 50% in 2025. So somewhere in that 40 to 50% range is probably where the guidance will land. Like, does it affect the ITC this year or next year? I don't know, but to be prepared, I think it makes sense to align with manufacturers that have a domestic strategy, distributors that can get you that equipment if you decide to use TPO products that require or incentivize domestic content, and not just say, oh, this is for next year, I'm not going to think about this.
Okay, great. And flipping over to the tariff side of things, another audience question was, do pending tariffs affect material that is already in existing inventory? And my interpretation of that question is like inventory at a distributor.
Yeah,
I think it can.
All right.
that's a good question. There's that's like a law firm question. I think I don't want to give the wrong information on that in terms of guidance, but I know it is possible to import content, like import a bunch of it, because you want to try to get around the tariff and to have it come back on you. So it depends, I think, and it would depend, I think, on the country of origin and the current policy landscape, which is changing super fast. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, we subscribe to someone that gives us like current tariff information, and usually there's like one email a quarter or so with an update and a deck on what's happening, and there have been like 3 emails in the past month on like changes to the policy. Like,
Yeah.
it's moving a lot faster than certainly than it did last year. So yeah, well, I don't want to give incorrect information on it. So I think it would depend on the country and what equipment and yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's as much of an answer as we can get today. Sean, here's a question for you that I got from the audience. What sort of confidence can you speak to homeowners that are concerned about the security of the ITC?
I mean, my outlook on the ITC is obviously that was part of the Inflation Reduction Act. I don't believe that it's something, that an executive order is going to be able to wipe out. I think it is going to take, a vote to modify that. Although, the Republicans do control the House and Senate. I just don't feel like that's going to be something that it's not the biggest concern for me. So, I would, especially in terms of a time frame, I don't think it's something that is gonna, someone's gonna say tomorrow, hey, the ITC's gone. I think even if it does go like before, there will be a step down process in place. That's just what I believe.
Okay, great. Chris, if you were talking to a residential homeowner considering solar, I know you're more in the data sphere, but if you were having that conversation, would your response be similar?
Yeah, I think so. Like the adders, I think you can safe harbor, and so that they won't, people have the ability to lock that in for 2025. And yeah, the ITC, I got like shot. It's not something that changes overnight, and there'll be a step down. So, I don't think there's a huge concern of it, like offering it now and it going away immediately, or not being able to fulfill on that promise. But I don't know. I haven't sold solar in the home, so I'd probably focus on other things, like need for resiliency in your home. And, I have a power wall at my house, and, focus on other topics if I were
Yeah.
selling.
Great, great. All right. So I want to switch gears now a little bit and talk about more in depth about what companies can do to adjust to the current environment. So we've touched on that a bit, but let's really get into it. So here's another audience question. This came pre-submitted from Sean Runge. What sales tactics or messaging approaches are most effective in today's environment? So Sean, your team works with sales channel partners across a variety of markets. What has Empower done over the past year to make this model work?
I mean, I think, more so than anything, the value proposition for a homeowner is control. The control that they have by producing their own energy. There is some peace of mind that is, able to be gained by that, and shielding themselves from inflation, over time. Even with TPO product, although the ownership component is not there, they know what they're getting into as it relates to price increases with any type of adder that might be present with the TPO agreement. So I think that more so than anything, it's about control. It's about peace of mind and being able to produce your own energy on your own house.
Yeah, great. And what kind of steps have you taken to differentiate yourselves from some of the bad actors that have, really been in the news regarding residential solar over the past year?
Well, I mean, I think internally, one of the things that we really pride ourselves with is our technical underwriting when we first get a job in, and vetting that job to make sure that it is something that the numbers are correct, the production values are correct, the property is suitable for solar. So I think it really starts with that. I think that also, product mix, we're very much creatures of habit. We stick with 1 to 2 panels, 1 inverter, and 1 racking system all the time. Tried and true quality components, not looking for the cheapest thing, to sell a consumer to try to, make the biggest profit. And then I think being, a company that offers a third party insurance policy, which we do, I think that is, something if customers feel the need to have that additional layer of protection, I think that's a great solution for homeowners, to provide them an extra layer of peace of mind.
Absolutely. And what other steps have you done to, really improve upon the customer care aspect of making this all work?
Well, not to plug our host here, but we recently actually deployed Bodhi throughout our entire customer mix. And, we've always been the quick lesson I learned when I first got into solar, as it relates to customer experience, is that the customer has to be communicated with. I mean, that it's the bottom line. They're buying something that they don't know a lot about. It's a big purchase, and that the non-contact aspect. If you're not keeping in communication with them, they start to get antsy, and they start to doubt what their decisions. So I think the communication with the consumer is paramount. We try to communicate every single week with the customer, whether we have a meaningful update or not. And one of the things that Bodhi has done for us, it's allowed our customer ambassadors to service more customers and still provide a super high level of communication through automation and AI technology. So it takes a lot of the mundane updates off their plate so that they can focus on more personalized updates that are specific to the projects.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. And I did get another audience question about, bigger picture. What role do you think AI will play in changing the solar industry in 2025? Does anybody have any examples of other great uses of AI in solar that are giving people a leg up?
Yeah, I think, oh, go ahead.
No, you got it.
I used to be the COO at Solar Reviews before this, so we did a lot of lead generation for installers and tried a lot of different things, and didn't have Gen AI at the time when I was at the company to help with answering questions that the customer has as they're filling out a lead form. And I see a future, and there's a few companies experimenting with this, like Wattbot, like Demand IQ, Aurora LeadCap, that are trying to get customers further down the funnel on the solar installer's website before they talk to a salesperson, and give them more information, answer more questions prior to needing to be, door knocked and talked to, and like put the customer more in control. So I think we'll see how this evolves, but I imagine some installers adopting Gen AI tools that allow you to get pretty far into the sales journey, potentially even to the point where you could put a deposit down, and that becomes a larger share of your deals.
Yeah.
In combination with potentially acquiring leads from third-party sources or your direct sales team, but starting to focus more of your energy on your own website, especially with the new one-to-one consent rule that came out this year, where the multi-cell lead landscape is really changing. Basically, there's a real change to how lead generators now have to present info to a consumer. So the old model of you fill out a website form on one of the lead gen sites, and then you're matched with who knows how many solar installers can't happen anymore legally. They now need to display which solar installer it's matching with, and presumably that's going to drive up costs for solar installers that are out there acquiring leads. So that kind of leads me to thinking, oh, if I'm making a recommendation to solar installers, I recommend using these AI tools to try to enhance the experience on your own website, to make it easier for a customer that wants to do it themselves to go further and further down the funnel. Get traffic to your website is still challenging through like SEO, paid search, social, but in the long run, that's going to put you in a really strong position as a business if you have a portion of your own funnel that's controlled, and these tools can allow you to potentially do it at low cost. So I'm super excited about how this could affect customer acquisition costs and start to balance some of the stuff we might see with like supply chain increases.
Amazing. Thank you. Chris, what was your input there?
Yeah, just a different angle on AI. Not really operational, but just for the market. What's happening is with all the hyperscalers and AI demand, I think a stat that we quote is like there's 160% load growth forecasted for data centers because of AI. And what that does is just puts a ton of pressure on utility rates, especially in certain markets. And so it's a real positive for, as you know, utility rates is like the number one driver other than interest rates for our market. And so that'll put a lot of long-term pressure on rates and be beneficial for our market.
Yeah, absolutely. I live in Northern Virginia, and there's data centers galore, so it's definitely a very real and visible issue. And I think there is opportunity for our industry from that angle as well. Awesome. I saw in the chat,
MJ, one point I just saw in the comments that they did defer the one-to-one consent rule. That's right. The folks that mentioned that. So the day before it was supposed to go into effect, they pushed it 1 year, which is good in some ways for people that rely a lot on multi-cell leads. But you can probably, it depends on the stance the FCC takes, but you can probably assume that it's likely that putting consumers more in control of the lead gen experience is a good thing for our industry, and something that we should strive towards even still.
Great, thank you. I also saw in the chat that people want to talk batteries. So Chris, we have seen several markets other than California now move away from net metering infrastructure. What trends have been seen in solar penetration and battery attachment rates in some states, even outside of California or within, if you'd like to comment on that as well?
Yeah, it's a really positive sign that we're seeing. It's obviously California is like 90% attachment rates, but in a lot of the other markets, like Colin mentioned, Florida. One thing about Florida is there's a really good resiliency need there, and so we've seen attachment rates in Florida and Texas. I think Texas was like 20% in the latest data. Also with Arizona's probably like 25%. So yeah, we've started to see that attachment rates go up. The other thing that's more interesting too, which will drive future attachment rates. Sorry, I also didn't mention North Carolina. North Carolina is another one where they had a power pair program, and we've seen attachment rates go up there. The other thing that'll drive future attachment rates is we've seen all these virtual power plant programs pop up. So there's a lot of legislation going on that are requiring utilities to do pilots. Like I think there's one in Colorado. So we're seeing a lot more interest in that. And I'm actually in Vermont where the first VPP program was. So and they just lifted the cap last year on it. So there's a lot of activity in storage, and it's a good way too to if you want to position yourself. Like I see a lot of people who are doing battery retrofits or trying to do more storage. So it's a good way to hedge the business a bit.
Awesome. Awesome. Sean, what's your take on that, on responding to net metering changes? Is storage the first thing you jump to, or what's Empower's approach?
I mean, I think, in talking about batteries, I think that batteries, serve a purpose in some markets, where the cost of power is very high, where you have extreme shifts in time of use rates, like a California. But in many areas, even in the Southeast, where we've had, traditionally strong battery attachment numbers, like in Georgia, Carolinas, the biggest problem I see with batteries is the setting of the proper expectation at the point of sale. That to me is the biggest conundrum about batteries. It makes it's a much more technical install. So you have to have a completely different type of understanding as it relates to a technical standpoint. But I think, there's two ways to go about doing it. When you have a scenario where net metering is ending, you can either go with storage. And again, depending on the kilowatt hour rate of the utility, that might or might not pencil out financially, or you can downsize. You can go with the smaller system and avoid excess generation as best as you can by sizing the system much smaller. So I think you have options either way. I don't think the end of net metering in a specific market is going to kill a market. I think that you just have to be able to pivot and adjust, how you go to market.
Great, great. Awesome. And I know that came up in the chat. I've been getting questions about it, even though I'm in the software world, but people are really struggling with the Tesla Powerwall right now. Colin, do you have any input on how installers can get out of that tight spot at the moment?
The product has really high demand with homeowners, so it is challenging to pivot if they're like, I want Tesla, and that's where their mind is. But there are other really nice products in the market, like Franklin's doing really well for us right now. And you can, sell the value prop with like the A-Power 2, like that, there's other options that you can pivot a customer to. And I love hearing stories like in the chat, someone saying they're having 98% attach rate for the past year.
Yeah.
And I've heard other installers that have like pivoted their sales team to become more effective with selling storage based on energy resiliency, like, the battery backup part of the picture, but also just, control. And, you weave that in with like the conversion increase that could potentially tell with also selling a domestic manufacturing story, made in people love like made in America, like it really speaks strongly to certain consumers. So if you can, combine those two together, it can potentially show you an increase in conversion rates and lead to like a larger sale with more margins on each deal. So I think some installers that I hear doing it effectively, like on every deal, they're including a storage option at the very least. So
Yeah.
the consumer can choose, and highlighting the benefits of going one versus the other.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for all of that. It's now time for just kind of general Q&A. So these might just be coming from left and right, trying to get to as many questions as we can. So one interesting question I see here is, what is the latest data on how solar adds to a home's value? Sean, do you have any commentary on that and how Empower frames things?
I mean, I think that varies greatly depending on the geographic area of the country that you're selling solar in. The appraisers' knowledge and understanding of solar. One of the things that we did and have been doing for quite a long time is we have partnered with Pearl, and that's a really great value add. It basically allows the customer to receive a report after the install is completed that shows the methodology and the reasoning of why this home and the structure should be valued at a higher rate. Other than that, though, I mean, we've had definitely, you know, mixed experience based on geography. So I don't know if I would say that there is any one, you know, percentage or increase in value that you could go with, because it just varies so greatly depending on the market.
Okay, great. And here's another question for you, Sean. What role will service play in the expected rebound of our industry? I know we've all seen, you know, unfortunately, plenty of resi installers have folded, leaving lots of orphaned systems out there that the active installers are adopting. So how has Empower responded to that increased, you know, maybe increased demand for service needs and increased expectations from the consumers?
Well, first off, I would say I think that there is a tremendous opportunity in our industry for service-only providers to come into the marketplace. You know, because traditional installers, they're primarily, you know, wanting to install new projects. So it's a completely different animal. It's been challenging. Then you throw some hurricanes in there with, you know, damaged roofs and, you know, R&Rs that have to happen. So it's definitely been a challenge. Luckily, you know, positive and negative, you know, like you had stated at the beginning, a lot of companies have gone out of business. So there's a lot of good talent that is in the marketplace to be able to pick and choose through.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know that qualified installers, qualified professionals of all capacities, but really in the installation sphere has been a bottleneck in the industry for the past couple of years. So my hope is that despite these unfortunate rearrangements, some of those problems can be alleviated, and there are just more and more qualified professionals available to install solar all the time. And let me take one more question before we move on to kind of the wrap up of the panel here. Do you think virtual power plant programs are good for the consumer? Anybody want to take that one?
Yeah, I can take it. I mean, I'm a participant in one in Vermont, and it was, you know, kind of an easy decision for us. We got you know, we're in rural Vermont, and we get backup power, and we pay like $50 a month. So and didn't really have to do a lot of work or thinking about it. So in that sense, it was good. I know there's a lot of different structures, and there's been some issues. Like there's swell exited the markets. There's been some issues. So I'm not an expert on the mechanics of every single program, but I know personally it was helpful. I just also wanted to say, MJ, this is probably the most engaged audience. I'm reading some awesome comments in the chat. I'm just learning a lot here.
I know, I can't keep up. I'm stressing. But yeah, everybody's great. Thank you so much to everyone in the audience who's participating so much. One more big
That's the only just like on BPP. I mean, I think the only downside is like just cycling your battery more. Like that's, I can't really think of a strong downside from like a well-structured program. Like make more money in exchange for cycling your battery more, which, you know, when you look at like the stats of the batteries that are on the market right now, that's not really doing too much to your anticipation of reliability over the lifetime of the system.
Yeah, 100%. I think we have time for one more question. So this one was a submitted audience question. What is going to happen with REAP funds and bonus adders on the ITC? So I know this one is already at the moment kind of real, as in funds have been frozen. Anybody want to take a guess at what the future might hold for businesses that have heavily, you know, relied on those REAP funds?
I'm not as familiar with the refunds, but I think on the adders, I think Colin covered the general consensus. I think is that they'll probably go away. So there was a 10% domestic content, energy community, and LMI one, and I think the consensus is that those will probably go away when the IRA is changed. But they'll still be around for a year. You can like safe harbor, but I think they'll close down.
Okay, great. Sean, I saw a laugh from you. Any further
I
input?
mean, how can anybody know? You know, I think
Yes,
anybody's guess is as good as another. I mean, you know, things are happening so quickly right now. I don't think there's any way to really even take a breath. So it's just very difficult to guess, you know, what might or might not happen in the future.
absolutely. All right, so let me get to wrapping up with one final question for everybody. So if you could share one super practical or tactical thing that each person here listening to this session can go back and try at their business, what would be your highest recommendation? So I'll start with you, Sean.
Again, you know, just to kind of rehash what I said at the beginning, I think you got to be agile in this industry. You know, they call it the solar coaster for a reason. It's heavily influenced, you know, by federal and state policies, government incentives, utilities, and you know, market shifts. And you know, I think you have to stay informed, you know, on industry news and trends. The more knowledge you have, the better prepared you're going to be, you know, for rapid changes in the marketplace. And you know, having a strategy to pivot will, you know, position you for long-term success.
Absolutely. Awesome. Colin, how about yourself?
I think just like communication and forecasting is key, like trying to recognize the manufacturers, the distributors, the software providers are all in the market to try to help your business and give you the best info we can. So lean on those relationships and try to extract as much value as you can out of them. You know, there's information you can use to make better decisions in your business around stuff that we talked about today, like, you know, the likely trends towards domestic content and trying to align with manufacturers that can fill that, like better forecasting, enables a distributor to bring in the product ahead of time that you know you're going to need. All those things just, they help you out in the long term. And if you're comparing two installers together, like one that does that active communication versus one that doesn't is going to have the advantage.
For sure. And how about you, Chris?
I would say be conservative, and because the long-term trends in this industry are very positive, and those are not going to change. Utility rates are just going to keep going up, and interest from consumers is going to improve. But this is going to be a turbulent. You know, it's always turbulent in the short term. So just be conservative and make sure you know you can be here for the long term.
Amazing. Yeah. And I think if I could add my 2 cents, I would also say just, yeah, like Sean touched on earlier, centering the consumer at the heart of what we do. You know, I think we really can't afford to provide bad service to anyone. So as much as we can really respect the consumer's role in energy transition, the more we're all going to succeed. And then the other thing I would add is, obviously we got a lot of questions here about particular states, and it's hard to touch on all of them in 1 hour. But I know from my job as a project manager in Washington, D.C., before I worked at Bodhi, I got so much value out of working with my local chapter of SIA. It's called CHESA in this area. So I think local advocacy is really valuable, not just for the outcomes that you're trying to reach together, but also just for, you know, non-competitive knowledge sharing, kind of like we've been doing in this session here. So I definitely endorse that as a really good strategy that benefits all of us in this industry. So thank you everybody so much, especially our panelists. I want to give you guys the opportunity to plug your organizations. Sean, I will start with you.
You know, we formed in power to do solar the right way. And I think, you know, by taking care of the customer, focusing on the customer, making sure that they're taken care of, that, you know, that equals the profit. Instead of worrying about, you know, making money, worry about the customer and the profit will come. And, you know, we're working with, you know, really good partners throughout the country and the markets that we serve. So anybody that's interested in finding out more, reach out.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Sean. How about you, Chris?
Yeah. So we're a market intelligence platform, but we're also so we kind of do forecasts and that kind of traditional stuff. We're also really passionate about the industry, and want to use our information to be helpful to regional and local businesses. So call to action is like you can actually sign up for a lot of the information that I'm referencing here, the reports and data about local markets. You can sign up and get a lot of that for free if you're an installer. So I'm just going to post the sign up there in the chat.
Perfect.
Action for the audience.
Awesome. Thanks. And finally, you, Colin.
Awesome. Yeah, great products on this webinar. We are active users of Ohm and rely on it for a lot of business decisions. Done a great job with it. And, Bodhi is a great product as well. So Sunergy is a really rapidly expanding solar distribution company. We started off with 2 locations in Texas and now have 7 locations, more than doubled the size of the team, and are expanding because of job site delivery, really high touch service, like no clients too small. And we're trying to go above and beyond to try to exceed metrics on order accuracy, things that we know there are distributors in the market struggle with. So I would love to chat if you have any questions about supply, and especially stuff that we talked about, like domestic content bundles. That's something that is a big focus for us right now, and we are actively able to serve that part of the market.
Yeah, absolutely. That's huge. Well, awesome. This has been such a good conversation. I hope you all enjoyed the discussion as much as I did moderating. And I'm sure the audience still has lots of questions they still want to ask because we couldn't get to all of them. So if you'd like to contact any of the panelists, including myself, our LinkedIns are in the chat there. Slide on into the DMs. Finally, I would like to invite installers on this call to participate in an industry-wide survey from Energy Sage and NABCEP that will be used to shape and share insights on the state of our industry. So we're going to put that link in the chat, and then the results from that survey will go out to people who respond first. So you'll have access to that as well. I think it will offer additional insights on what to expect for this year. So finally, if you're a Resi installer who is sick of your team constantly answering what's going on with my solar project to your customers, Bodhi's customer experience platform can help. So please message me or talk to us at bodhi.solar. All right, that's it from me. Thank you all so much, and I wish you a very successful and bountiful 2025.
Thanks, MJ.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.